In the quiet, tree-lined neighborhoods of Spokane, Washington, an unimaginable horror was taking shape. Between 1975 and 1998, Robert Lee Yates Jr. led a secret life marked by bloodshed and deception. While his neighbors saw a friendly, middle-aged father and devoted husband, authorities would later uncover Yates was a prolific serial killer who had brutally murdered at least 13 women, most of whom were sex workers. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and join us as we uncover the terrifying truth behind Robert Lee Yates, one of America's most deceptive killers. All-American life. Robert Lee Yates Jr. was born on May 27, 1952, in Oak Harbor, Washington. He came from a devout Seventh-day Adventist family, raised under strict religious values. By all appearances, his early life was uneventful. Yates was described as polite, respectful, and quiet. There were no overt signs of violence or cruelty in his youth. In 1975, Yates joined the U.S. Army and embarked on what appeared to be a distinguished military career. He served as a helicopter pilot in multiple combat zones, including Germany, Somalia, and Haiti. His performance earned him numerous awards, and his military service earned him widespread respect. At home, Yates lived in Spokane with his wife and 5 children. He coached Little League, attended church regularly, and kept a pristine home. To his friends, colleagues, and neighbors, he was the epitome of stability and decency. But behind that facade lurked a compulsive predator who was quietly taking lives. The first signs of darkness. According to FBI investigations, Yates's first known murder may have occurred as early as 1975, the same year he got married. The victim was Patrick Oliver, a 21-year-old hitchhiker found shot to death in Mill Creek Canyon. He had been buried in a shallow grave alongside his girlfriend, Susan Savage. Their case remained unsolved for decades, with no immediate ties to Yates. By the early 1990s, Yates had escalated his killing spree. He began preying on sex workers in Spokane's East Central District, an area known for high drug use and transient populations. These women were vulnerable and often overlooked by society, making them prime targets for a predator like Yates. Yates's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He would solicit sex workers, often in his white Corvette or van, and drive them to remote locations. Once there, he would shoot them in the head with a .25 caliber handgun. In many cases, he used plastic bags to prevent blood from staining his vehicle. After killing them, he either dumped the bodies in secluded areas or, in some cases, buried them. The victims. The confirmed list of victims attributed to Yates includes Sean Johnson, 36, murdered in December 1996. Melanie Sue Thies, 26, murdered in July 1997. Jennifer Joseph, 16, murdered in August 1997. Heather Hernandez, 20, murdered in August 1997. Darcy Anderson, 36, murdered in December 1997. Darla Scott, 29, murdered in January 1998. Linda Maybell, 44, murdered in February 1998. Melody Murfin, 43, murdered in May 1998. Murfin's case was particularly gruesome. Her body was discovered buried just feet away from Yates's bedroom window in his own backyard. His children and wife had been living under the same roof, unaware of the horror so close to home. Each of these women was a daughter, sister, or mother. Many had turned to sex work due to addiction or economic desperation. Yates targeted them because he believed society wouldn't notice or care if they vanished. Sadly, for a time, he was right. The investigation begins. By the late 1990s, local law enforcement and the FBI began noticing a disturbing pattern. Numerous sex workers had gone missing or turned up murdered in similar circumstances. The Spokane Police Department formed a task force to investigate the growing number of cases. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit provided a psychological profile of the likely suspect. He was described as a white male in his 40s or 50s, intelligent and methodical, possibly with military background, and someone who blended into society easily. This description would later prove eerily accurate. Authorities began canvassing the red light districts, interviewing sex workers, and compiling a list of potential suspects. Surveillance increased, and investigators combed through hundreds of vehicle registrations, particularly those involving white Corvettes. The breakthrough. In March 2000, investigators received a crucial tip. A sex worker who had narrowly escaped a suspicious encounter described her attacker and the vehicle he drove. It matched the description of Yates's van. Soon, his name surfaced in connection with multiple disappearances. Detectives subpoenaed Yates's DNA and matched the evidence found on one of the victims. This was the breakthrough they needed. On April 18, 2000, Robert Lee Yates Jr. was arrested outside his home in Spokane. The public was stunned. Media outlets swarmed his neighborhood. His family, blindsided by the revelations, struggled to reconcile the man they loved with the accusations leveled against him. The confession. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Yates confessed to 13 murders in Spokane between 1996 and 1998. In exchange for his cooperation and to spare his family the trauma of a public trial, he accepted a plea bargain. In 2000, he was sentenced to 408 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Yates's confession was chilling in its detail. He showed no visible remorse and described the murders in a matter-of-fact tone. FBI agents later described him as highly intelligent, emotionless, and obsessed with control. The death penalty and a second trial. In 2002, prosecutors in Pierce County charged Yates with 2 additional murders, those of Constance Ellis and Sean Johnson. These cases involved greater brutality and post-mortem mutilation, which prosecutors argued warranted the death penalty. This time, Yates won a trial. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was transferred to Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, where he awaited execution. However, in 2018, the Washington Supreme Court ruled that the state's death penalty was unconstitutional due to racial bias and inconsistent application. Yates's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment without parole. A pattern of deception. Throughout his killing spree, Yates maintained his double life with chilling precision. He coached youth sports, celebrated birthdays, and flew medical evacuation missions overseas. He even underwent regular psychological evaluations as part of his military career, but never raised any red flags. FBI profilers noted that Yates exhibited traits consistent with psychopathy, superficial charm, lack of empathy, and manipulativeness. He compartmentalized his life so effectively that even his closest relatives were completely unaware of his crimes. Cold cases and unanswered questions. Even after his convictions, questions remained. Could Yates have killed more people? Authorities believe it's likely. He served in multiple countries during his military career and had access to countless potential victims. Several cold cases from Washington, Oregon, and even Germany have been re-examined for possible links to him. In particular, the 1975 murders of Patrick Oliver and Susan Savage were eventually linked to Yates through DNA evidence and ballistic testing. These murders, committed long before his known spree, suggest he may have been killing for decades. The victims remembered. Despite the sensational nature of the case, efforts have been made to shift focus from the killer to his victims. Memorial services, vigils, and awareness campaigns have honored the women whose lives were taken. Organizations in Spokane now work more closely with at-risk populations, especially sex workers, to ensure their safety. The case also prompted changes in how law enforcement investigates crimes involving vulnerable communities. Today, Yates remains behind bars at the Washington State Penitentiary. The full extent of his crimes may never be known.